6% in the last election. I didn't demean them, I didn't write them off, I didn't call them names, I did not judge them. I showed up to listen to them, to respect them, because I sought to serve them and fight for them. And I had no hope of delivering if I had not shown up first to hear what was on their minds. So that's the way that I'm wired. That's the way that I campaign and the way in which I serve. And if I'm your nominee, this country's going to have a very clear choice in someone, as you just described, who looks at politics as entertainment and an opportunity to demean and divide people, and someone who looks at it as a calling, as a way to bring people together around common ambitions. Thanks for the question. Appreciate it.
So much for being here today. It's really impressive to have somebody that come to small town Iowa in the first place, and I'm an alumni anyway. So my biggest question is, people with disabilities are often people the most in need of quality healthcare insurance and low income. It's not just people with all kinds of disabilities, but the biggest thing, where privatization of Medicaid has really affected this population in Iowa. And many of us, I'd say 50% of the people I know want to work, but if they don't have access to these long-term care services, they don't have any chance of actually being a working, tax-paying American. Any ideas on healthcare and people with disabilities' ability to work?
Yeah, great question, and I love the way that you phrase this. Universal guaranteed high-quality healthcare is not just the right thing to do. It doesn't just allow us to follow the moral imperative. As the wealthiest and most powerful country on the face of the planet, that is seeing people today die of diabetes 97 years after insulin was developed, or curable cancers, or the flu. To me, that's unconscionable. But you also point out that we're not allowing people to live to their full potential. When they're well enough to go to school, graduate from college, go to a job, pay taxes, start a business, create jobs, they're able to shoulder their fair share of the burden, which everybody wants to be able to do. That burden therefore rests a little bit lighter on everybody else. So it also is a way of unleashing the true economic potential and performance, not just of every American, but of this economy. So investing in that, which does not sound like an inexpensive proposition, ensuring that every single person can see that doctor, receive that medication, get that therapy, be well enough to be who they're supposed to be. That may be expensive, but relative to how we pay or fail to pay for care today, when the largest provider of mental health care services in Texas is the county jail system, when those who are not able to afford insulin have diabetes, then have glaucoma, then are taking themselves to the emergency room, where the outcomes will not be as good, where the care is going to be exponentially more expensive, where they will be in no way able to pay for it, but you will if you're lucky enough to have insurance through rising premium costs. I will as a taxpayer. Making that investment then seems like a really smart choice that pays returns over the lifetime of the beneficiary, which is ultimately the American taxpayer. In our schools, as you may know, we have a program called IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. The federal government is supposed to pay 40% of the cost of making sure that we're there to bring out the full potential of all of our students. Right now, we pay about 17%. I want to make sure that the federal government pays its full freight to bring out the very best from those students and to support those educators, very often in special needs classrooms, who have more students than they can adequately spend time on. Let's double up our resources there so that every child gets the education that they need. And then lastly, one of the disturbing trends, and this has ownership both of Republicans and Democrats, in the care for Americans living with disabilities, is to institutionalize them. Not only is that incredibly expensive to do, but again, on the moral dimension of this, it robs them of their independence, their ability to contribute to the success of their families and of their communities. So ensuring that our public policy supports people in their homes, with their families, in their communities, and allows them to enter the workforce and give us everything that they were born to do over the course of their lives is just smart public policy as well. So those are some steps I would like to take to get to those goals, to make sure that we're allowing everyone to reach their full promise. Thank you for the question. Appreciate it.
Straight in the back.
Beto, my name is Alex. I may not be a native of Iowa. I'm a native of Colorado, but I enjoy being able to get different views from different states. And this kind of hits hard with what your conversation was with coming out here to campaign, how you campaign with the people and you want to listen to voices. A little explanation with this question is if you would be in support of something called the Anti-Corruption Act. This is an act that is somewhat foundational in House Resolution 1 that was passed by the House of Representatives in the past year that deals with political bribery and special interest donors and eliminating that what we call dark money from the political spectrum. And I was wondering if you would be in support of a bill of that nature, not only as a fellow citizen, but also as a future president, where you end gerrymandering, you stop the revolving door, you get special interests out so that the people of the United States represent Congress, not people that represent corporations, special interest donors, and a lot of other groups of people that may not represent the entire US population.
Thanks, it's a really great question. And so HR 1, which deals with campaign, election, gerrymandering, political contribution reform, I'm in full support of. So if that is the specific question, the answer is yes. And I'll just tell you from my own experience and perspective, when we won a long shot campaign against the odds and against the incumbent in 2012 to represent my hometown in the United States Congress, the first big surprise is that all those other members of Congress turn out to be, for the most part, really nice, good people who ran for the right reasons and are doing their best to serve their constituents. The next big surprise for me helps to explain the disconnect between how I felt about those members of Congress and the performance of Congress as an institution. My first full day of orientation as a new member of Congress was not about how a bill becomes a law or how to gain the subject matter expertise on the Committee of Jurisdiction, which you had just been appointed to, or how to build relationships with the Republicans so that you could get something done. It was how to raise enough money to guarantee your reelection and to knock out those Republican incumbents so that your party could gain the majority. Now listen, the motivation was great. You got elected to do these great things. We want to put you into the majority so that you can accomplish them. But the compromises that you make in order to do that end up compromising your ability to serve the people that you represent. Otherwise, there's no other way to explain how in 2017, the Congress passed, the President signed into law, a bill that allows internet service providers to take your private browsing data and without your consent, sell it to the highest bidder. And we can all think of the weirdest places that we've ever been online, and now know that that was sold to somebody who was willing to pay the price without our permission. It is at odds with consumer interest, with the constituents of those members of Congress, but it was paid for by those who wrote the PAC checks that opened up the doors and literally purchased the outcomes of that legislation. We pay for as taxpayers the research and development that goes into coming up with the cures and medications that are then sold back to us at the highest prices on the planet. Though we have the purchasing power and leverage of buying in bulk for Medicare and Medicaid and TRICARE and VA and federally insured employees, we do not use that leverage to bring drug prices down. It does not make any sense unless you follow the money, the PACs, the dark money that finds its way onto the rolls of the members of the Commerce and Energy Committee that sets the rules of the road for that industry. So for that reason, for 5 years, I've not taken any PAC money at all, no corporate help, no special interest contributions, no lobbyists in this presidential run. And we also recently signed the fossil fuel pledge to make sure that there's neither the appearance of a conflict of interest or a real conflict of interest. I want you to know that I only answer to you, to human beings, to my fellow Americans, not to any other entities or organizations. So yes, let's walk the talk. Let's live it in our campaigns. And yes, let's pass legislation that ends the practice of members of Congress choosing their voters instead of the other way around and gerrymandering. Let's get big dark money out of congressional races and federal elections, and let's return democracy back to people. Thank you for the question. Appreciate that.
I guess mine is really kind of a two-part request. First, as there are so many Democratic candidates running, it seems like more and more people are trying to make themselves stand out in the pack. And so we are beginning to be offered and promised unrealistic things. Things like $2,000 pay increases for teachers across the country, which I know makes a great soundbite, but leaves us thinking how realistic and where would that money come from. And I know that's not your proposal. And I know that I'm not aware of you doing that to date, or I wouldn't be standing here now. But I would encourage you to please not fall into the trap of pandering to us, because we see past the smoke and mirrors, and my vote is not for sale. But the second part of that is, I support all of the things that you've talked about today. But what I do need to hear are some details. How, those are great, wonderful ideas that I support. What I want is somebody to tell me how, the details of how they actually intend to accomplish those things.
Is there, so you've caught me in a dilemma here. In order to be respectful of people's time and to touch upon the issues that we're all thinking about, I've got to keep that speech within a certain time limit to make sure that I answer your questions. But I want to make sure that I also answer this one in the specific. Give me an issue that you care about and give me a few minutes to answer it in detail.
Well, I'm glad to hear you touch on healthcare today, because healthcare seems to be an issue that is important, continues to be important to the American people, and I think everyone or their family has been touched by it in some way. But it's getting pushed to the back burner because it's not getting the press and media that some of the other issues, walls and those things are today.
Right.
So any details as to how we can accomplish getting that for people?
Yes, thanks for asking the question. And it has particular resonance, I understand, in Iowa, where we just had a failed privatization of Medicaid, which has sent reimbursement rates plummeting for providers. I just talked to an administrator of a rural hospital in Hamburg, Iowa, and from what he shared with me, it really sounds like it's going to be difficult going forward to keep the doors of that hospital open. In my home state of Texas, where we declined to even expand Medicaid in the first place, you're seeing one rural hospital after another shut down. The viability and the vitality of those rural communities is withering away. After the hospital shuts down, how do you recruit the school teacher to come to the independent school district? How do you get the young person who's moved away for college to even consider moving back? You don't. And so this is connected to so many other issues. The proposal that I am making is that everyone today who has no insurance at all be enrolled in Medicare. And I made the case earlier that that's a lot less expensive than waiting for their care to be delivered at the emergency room, where it's exponentially more expensive and the outcomes are far lower than they would have been otherwise. Or delivering mental health care in a county jail, where we so often do these days. Those who have insufficient insurance, meaning they're covered, but their care is not guaranteed. There was a school teacher in Weatherford, Texas, year before last, who died of the flu. Now, she had health insurance, but her copay on her flu medication was $219, which she did not have in her checking account. Ended up dying of something that is obviously curable or preventable unnecessarily. So if you cannot bridge your deductible, pay your premium, afford your copays, you can enroll in Medicare as well. However, if you have employer-sponsored insurance, private insurance, and it works for you and your family, and you want to be able to keep it under our plan, you would be able to do it. And if at any point you elect to move over to Medicare, you can do that as well. The total cost of this program is a fraction of Medicare for all, and it also is, I believe, politically the surest and the quickest path to get to universal guaranteed high quality healthcare. So that's the path that I'd like to take. That's some additional detail that shares with you how we're able to get there. But in the very short term, let's make sure that we shore up ACA. Let's make sure that we reverse this privatization of Medicaid in Iowa, and let's guarantee that everybody's able to get that care that they need to live to their full potential. Thanks for asking the question. Really appreciate it.
All right, this is our last question.
Thank you for coming to Wartburg.
Thank you.
And wait. One of the biggest threats to Mali's future is the federal deficit, which this year is going to be $1 trillion in 1 year. Mr. Trump has financed an economic boom with debt. What are you going to do about that?
You're right about the threat. As we continue to deficit spend to the tune of $1 trillion a year, adding to $22 trillion of debt, the service payments on that debt will include or cloud out our ability to pay for anything else that we need to fund in this country, whether it's education or support for students to be able to attend Wartburg, or infrastructure, or anything that you want to do will no longer become affordable for this country. And it is happening at a time that Republicans had controlled every single lever of power. A great opportunity, though this is the last of the reasons to be talking about this, but a great opportunity for Democrats to reclaim the mantle of fiscal responsibility in the United States of America. How did we get to this point? During the George W. Bush administration, there were 2 separate rounds of tax cuts that were expensive to finance, added to the debt, flowed disproportionately to the wealthiest in this country. In this administration, 2 years ago, at a time that we were $21 trillion in debt, our answer to the challenges of this country was a $2 trillion tax cut that flowed to the wealthiest at a time of wealth inequality that was unlike any other time in our history, and at a moment that we had so many unmet needs in this country and corporations who were sitting on record piles of cash. Además, in addition, we are in our 18th year of war in Afghanistan, our 28th year of war in Iraq through 6 successive presidential administrations. I was the age of some of the people here in this room. I was a senior in high school when George H.W. Bush first announced the use of military force and U.S. service members in that country, and we've been there every single administration since. Tonight, those service members' lives on the line with no definition of victory, no commonly understood strategy, and no prospect of an exit or an end to this fight. That has racked up additional trillions of dollars on that debt. When you add to that the greatest recession since the Great Depression, and the bailout that helped to start the economic recovery that this president is taking credit for, you begin to understand how we got here. So how do we get out? We rolled back the worst excesses of those Trump tax cuts. We had a corporate rate that was brought down from 35% to 21%. Even if you didn't take it all the way back up, but moved it into the mid-20s, you would generate hundreds of billions of dollars over the next 10 years. If in that same tax code, you were to tax capital at the same rate that you tax ordinary income or wages, you would generate additional hundreds of billions of dollars. And if we were to decide as a country that we were not going to pursue our foreign policy on the backs of 18 and 19 and 20-year-old women and men who are deployed not just in Afghanistan and Iraq tonight, but in Syria, Somalia, Libya, Yemen, just to name 6 countries that we are now at war in, there would be a tremendous savings in human life. There would be greater ability for us to achieve our foreign policy goals, and we would save over the long term trillions of dollars in the costs of war and the cost to care for those who have fought those wars over the long term. The prospects in the short term do not look good. The president has threatened to invade Venezuela and is now sending an aircraft carrier group and land-based bombers to confront Iran at this moment. If you look to the president who preceded him, without firing a shot, or sending a single U.S. service member, he was able to negotiate an end to Iran's nuclear armament program. It didn't solve every problem in the Middle East or every one of our problems with Iran, but I think it affords us a great template that is affordable for this country and affordable for those who we ask to put their lives on the line for the United States of America. So those are some of the changes that I would take in tax code, in our foreign policy, that would not only make this a stronger country, but would end to deficit spending in the United States of America. Thanks, appreciate it. That's it? Okay. So Cynthia's telling me that was our final question. Waverly, Wartburg, thank you for inviting us out to be here today. Ian, thank you for getting us kicked off. Really grateful for all the questions, your attention. Hope to earn your support and your commitment to caucus for us. We will be back to make sure that we answer more questions. I cannot tell you how many Iowans I've met who tell me, I like you, Beto, but I'm waiting for the 4th or 5th visit until I can really make up my mind. So you all take this seriously, and I appreciate that. I want to make sure that I'm responsive to that, and that you're allowed to do your due diligence on me as a candidate. Thank you all for having us out. Really appreciate it.